Okay, Bill, we are live.
Great, thanks. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry about the delay. We've had some technical difficulties here and across the Atlantic with Facebook, but it's nice for you to be with us tonight. For those that don't know me, my name is Bill Williams. I'm Director of Language Rights and International Sales for the Nori Media Group, and Destiny Image is one of our publishing divisions. And I have a wonderful guest with us tonight, the Canon Andrew White. We've just published his brand new book, The Glory Zone in the War Zone, which I'm holding a nice copy up for you to all see. And I'm going to interview Andrew. Andrew is a very, very good friend. He's also a Liverpool FC soccer supporter. And I'm an Everton FC soccer supporter, and they're both in the same city. And I've asked Andrew if he would raise his Everton mug, and I'll raise mine.
Everton Andrew White mug.
Yes,
given to me by you.
I sent him a special present. He's a Liverpool supporter. I'm generous all of the time.
Well, look at it is that Liverpool is one of the greatest cities in England.
I was born there.
Yeah, and you're a local.
Yeah. Well, look, Andrew, it's wonderful to have you here on live Facebook with us, as people be listening in from both sides of the Atlantic. We want to thank St. Andrew's, which is a Christian bookstore in the UK, for setting this event up and hosting it. I want to ask Andrew some questions about his new book tonight, and I'll get him to speak into these things. So The Glory Zone in a War Zone, that's such a powerful title. So does this really sum up your experience in Baghdad, Andrew?
It's the nature of my life. And I'm so grateful to Destiny Image for publishing this work, because I've written many books before, probably some 20, but this is the first time I've been given the freedom to speak openly and honestly, particularly about the supernatural. And my life in Israel, Palestine, Gaza, Iraq, Lebanon, all these places has literally been seeing the glory of God coming into the midst of a war zone. And what this book is all about is a unique insight into the truly incredible divine reversal of God turning around the terrible to be the wonderful, of God turning around the impossible to be the more than possible.
Well, I'm really fascinated by that. I'm also fascinated about some of the stories in the book. You talk a lot about resurrections in the book. Can you relate to us the story about the baby who was taken out of the fridge mortuary?
Well, resurrection was something which was regularly. I've never had resurrection stories outside of Iraq. And it was amazing that in the midst of so much death, when we prayed for the dead to be raised, they were. And there's one, the story you're talking about was when the Mothers Union from our church went to visit a ward in the hospital one day and found a mother there crying and crying. And they said, "What's happened?" And they said, "Her baby has just died and been taken to the mortuary." Unlike hospitals in England and America, in Iraq, you can just pop down to the mortuary. So they popped down and said, "Where is the baby?" And they said, "In the fridge." And they went to the fridge, they got the baby out, They held it, cuddled it, prayed for it, and said, "Come alive in Yeshua's name." And the baby started crying. And they took the baby back to the ward, and there were now 2 people crying.
Wow. That is an amazing story. In the book, you also talk about angels, which fascinates an awful lot of people, including myself. You talk about angels showing up in times of worship with the youth. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, likewise, here, I've never known the presence of angels like there. Yes, we believe there is angelic presence in meetings, and we feel angelic direction. But their angels were seen every day, and particularly in our worship and in the reality of worship, and particularly our worship with the young people, we would see the angels appear. I had so many angels around me. My colleagues once said to me, my personal security detail, my bodyguards, said, "You don't need us with all your angels. They get everywhere." And we had a lot.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so many occasions the angels literally told us, they didn't speak to us, but for example, on one occasion they wouldn't let us go in a direction. And they said, "No, no, no." And then if we'd gone that way,
Wow.
we would have all been blown up. So many occasions where we were directed away from
Wow.
danger by angelic sources.
Wow. That is amazing. You've already mentioned divine reversal and how basically you took over Saddam Hussein's palace. You want to just enlighten us a little bit more on that?
Well, I personally didn't take over the whole palace, but the coalition took over the whole of his Republican palace and turned it into the headquarters of the Coalition Provision Authority. And the main room of the palace was Saddam's throne room. And there were Scud missiles up one wall, heading to Jerusalem on another wall. And there was the white horse in the ceiling. And there was his throne, solid gold throne, which was padded with most amazing cushions. And basically, they didn't need a throne anymore. So the throne room became the embassy chapel, and the throne became my pulpit. And the swimming pool became my baptistry. And their brothel became my prayer room. So it was a radical divine reversal of all that was meant for evil was turned into the place of God.
Wow, that is amazing. So, could you tell us about some of your favorite miracles regarding God's provision? I remember one about meat being delivered. Can you tell us a few stories about that?
Yes. I was actually with one of the senior Ayatollahs, Ayatollah Hussein al-Sadr, and he said to me, Abuna, Father, can you get us some food? We're in a terrible state. we don't have enough food. I said, for how many people? He said, everybody in Iraq. The next day, I was looking out of the window and I saw this amazing, what I thought was a glory cloud over the Tigris River. And I said to God, what is that? Is that a glory cloud? And he said, yes. And so I said, how do I find out about what it is? He said, read the book of Ezekiel. I didn't realize there were 48 chapters in Ezekiel. And after I'd read all the chapters, I remember what the Ayatollah said about needing some food. So I said, oh, yes, Lord, before I forget, could you give us some food? We need food for the people. Next morning, I went down for breakfast. A big American commander came up to me. Hey, Father, he says, you want some meat? I said, what do you mean, do I want some meat? He said, you're feeding the people of Iraq. Do you want some meat? I said, yes, I do. He said, I've got a lot. He had thousands and thousands of tons. And I asked him, how are we going to get it around? He said, we have got refrigerated lorries. In every area of the country, we have this meat. A few years later, I found myself living in the same cabin as this commander. And I said to him, how did you manage to get us all that meat? I called him, his name was Andy, so he became to me Andy the Meat Man. I even did his wedding eventually. I called him Andy the Meat Man in his wedding. And he turned around and said, all that meat was meant for the American army. It was all halal, suitable to be eaten by Muslims. And there was the wrong paperwork. So because the paperwork was wrong, we couldn't use it. So you got it. Isn't that an incredible story of how God changes what is terrible to be what is wonderful?
Yeah. Jehovah Jireh, our provider. That's a wonderful thing. Now, you took over the church, and I believe the church grew to over 6,000 people. Can you tell us how
it was derelict, redundant, nobody there. And we took it over, and it grew by at least 100 every week. The first service, we had an incredible array of people. We had the director of the CIA, the head of MI5, head of MI6, the head of military control for the British and the American. And that church grew to be a wonderful haven of the glory of God. And that church grew to be over 6,500 people. And today I still look after those same people, those same children that were in our church, and now the young people in our school in Jordan. We have a very big work amongst the Iraqi refugees in Jordan. There are people who have fled for their lives, and these people are giving them food, education, health care. We have a clinic, and all of it is a result of our people pulled out of darkness into wonderful light.
Wow. Wow. So, in one of the chapters, you talk about the perfect love of Jesus casting out all fear. Did you live a fearless life out there?
I can honestly say that apart from one occasion when I was kidnapped, I had no concept of fear ever. I was shown so much love by the Iraqi people, the Iraqi Christians, the Iraqi children. And I can remember when the Voice of the Martyrs were visiting us one day, and they said, Andrew, how is it that you've got mortar bombs dropping all the time? Your people are being killed, and yet your people are the happiest people we've ever seen. And one of our young people turned around and said, you see, when you've lost everything, Jesus is all you have left. And our people had lost everything, their homes, their families, their security, but they hadn't lost Jesus. And he was all they had left.
Hmm. Hmm. I was amazed by one of the chapters where you talk about the simple faith of the children in Iraq. I mean, we in the West live such a comfortable life. What would you say that we could learn from the simple faith that the children in Iraq had that would help us?
It was this issue of when you have lost everything, Jesus is everything. Yes, all our security, everything we thought we had to enable us to survive had gone. Our homes, our families, our security, our health care, but everything Jesus could provide. And Jesus would provide. No question about it.
So I'm hearing more and more stories of a man in a white suit turning up, especially in the Muslim world. I'm obviously involved in publishing all around the world, and I'm hearing more and more stories. Can you relate any stories that happened in Iraq?
Absolutely. It wasn't possible to go out on the streets and preach. If you did, you'd be killed. We didn't evangelize our people, but we didn't need to, because everybody I knew who came to faith, and there were many Muslims who came to faith, they would literally have a dream at night of the man in white, as they called him. This was a vision of Jesus, and he would come to them and simply say, follow me, and they would follow him.
Wow.
And this happened to all sorts of people. The founder of Hamas, it happened to one of the big ISIS commanders in the recent upsurge in violence, that the man in white would simply say, come here, follow me. and they would follow him.
Yeah. I'd like, if possible, to ask you $1 million question. And the question is, what's the real key, you would say, to be able to love our enemies?
The fundamental thing to love our enemies is realizing your love has got to be practical. We used to say when we meet, we eat, because every meeting dealing with the most complex political, economic, sociological issues, every meeting would involve usually killing a whole sheep and eating a whole sheep, which was very interesting because at the time I was a vegetarian. But you had to do it. And this was a wonderful sign just to be able to practically show you love people. You provided for their needs. And all of our people to this day in Jordan and in Iraq, we are providing them food. We are providing them costs for their housing. We are providing them sustenance. But first and foremost, we are providing them a way of worshipping God and coming together with the Almighty. And it's worship which sets them on fire. Worship that keeps them going.
Wow.
So in everything, there is worship, worship, and worship. All the time we acknowledge Jesus. Just this week, we've had a big issue amongst all of our refugee community in Jordan, all Iraqi refugees. They're children that I started looking after when they were little. And now their biggest event of the year was at Christmas, when I would go and I would be Papa Noel. And I would take them their Christmas present. And the children were so sad. Abuna, Abuna. They said, Papa Noel is not coming this year. Coronavirus, coronavirus, he can't come. But one of the children said, no, Papa Noel can't come. But the really good news is that Jesus is still coming.
Yeah, that's great news.
Yesterday we took all the children out in the locality. We took them to the local supermarket and bought them all their presents from Papa Noel.
Yeah.
Hope came back to them.
Yeah. I want to come back as we close to Jerusalem Merit, so that we can try and help out a little bit more there. I'm a pastor in a local church, as you know, as you've been to speak at my church, and I'm often involved in mission overseas. Brazil, we support churches in the Eastern Europe and in the Philippines. And I think the Western church is faced with an issue of that when it goes on mission, it tries to enforce its culture on the culture of the country that they could go to. The question I'd love to ask you is, what can we learn from Middle Eastern people in terms of their spiritual and cultural values and priorities, so that we can be more aware of what's going on?
They are great believers in not taking care, but taking risks. Taking risks for the kingdom of God. our people are taking risks every day to live as followers of Yeshua. And what I want our people to realize when they support any mission is that we are constantly being asked to stand beside those who are broken, who are hurt, who are being persecuted, who are being threatened for their faith, that they are so committed to taking risks for Jesus. A lot of my work isn't just in the Middle East, it's also in places like Pakistan, personal work. And it's wonderful to see that both in the Middle East and in Pakistan, we are living with a church which is suffering for the name of Jesus. And they will do anything. And they need us as those overseas people to stand with them, to support them, and to pray for peace and pay for peace.
Yeah.
You've got to have money, you can't do anything with it.
Canon Andrew, there might well be people listening in to us as we talk together, and they're actually not in a war zone, as we've tried to describe the contents of the new book. What would your message be to people suffering darkness and conflict and oppression right at this time?
Well, especially in this time of economic collapse, there are so many people who have lost their jobs. They seem to have lost their future. People are frightened. People are fearful. And God is saying to you, you're in a war zone. And yet the glory of God will still come to you. Just as the glory sustained me in the midst of the real war zone, so the glory will sustain you now in the midst of our crippling environment. Because the Lord is here and his Spirit is with us.
It has been a joy. It's always a joy. We get on so well. We like to have a laugh as well in these serious times. I'm so honored to be called one of your friends. And I'm praying that this new book, The Glory Zone and the War Zone, will do very well, because I know the monies go back into helping all of your people who are stranded in Jordan. Before I say something about that, could I ask you to pray a prayer of blessing over everyone who's watching this interview? And then I'll come back and talk about your book before we close out.
I pray God's blessing over you now in your war zone, over you in whatever difficulties you are facing. And we are all facing difficulties now. We are all struggling. There is fear everywhere. But Lord, will you come to us? And will you say to us, you have seen my glory in the war zone. You will see my glory in the fear zone. Take away this fear. And may we all know that you are here and your Spirit is with us.
Amen.
I mention my favorite verse in the Bible in this book, in Job chapter 42. And it's says have heard, now my eyes have seen. Before our ears may have heard the story of our theology, of our faith. Now is the time for us seeing the reality of the divine presence.
Yes. Amen. Just as we finish, the book is available, The Glory Zone in the War Zone. I put it up in front of me. It's available from St. Andrew's Christian bookshops. You can find them by just searching in the Google bar. We had some technical difficulties tonight. Otherwise, the website would have come across my page. When this program is finished, we will put some links up to where you can buy the book. Andrew also talked about helping the refugees, and you, if you want, can give to the Jerusalem Merit through their website, or you can contact Andrew directly if you just private message him on Facebook. If you want to make a donation to that work, it would be much appreciated. We do want to just thank you for joining with us. We're so excited to be able to represent Andrew all around the world. And I think from both of us, we just want to wish you all a peaceful and a restful Christmas in these difficult times. Thanks for joining us. God bless.
Blessings.